Hello and welcome back to my channel, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for taking some time just to hang out with me and listen to my ramblings on things. If you're watching this around the time that I am posting it, happy spring, happy Aries season. It is the new energetic year. I'm so excited. I can just feel the new energy, the shift in energy. It's been very impactful for me this year in particular. Actually, it's been really impactful for me the last couple of years, but this year in like a really cool new way. And so I'm just here for it. I'm feeling the positive vibes. I am just living life. Um, and on that note, I want to talk about shadow work because shadow work has been so instrumental in me getting to this point that I'm at right now. And I have so far to go still. I'm still so new in this whole journey, but I feel like I really dove kind of headfirst in everything. And because of that, I do feel like I've been able to experience a lot of things rather quickly. And shadow work is one where you hear it talked about. It's kind of like a buzzword these days, like shadow work. Hear it's the shadow self, and even people outside of the kind of like the spiritual community. This is like a phrase that people use, and I had heard the phrase before, but I never quite understood exactly what it was, and it's taken some trial and error to kind of figure out what it means to me personally in my own life. I do think while there could be an overarching kind of meaning of shadow work or shadow self, but I think internally it's a little bit, more different and nuanced for each individual. So I understood this concept as it was being presented to me. I had heard it talked about, watched some YouTube videos on it, and kind of got an idea of it, but I would say it took some kind of self exploration to really understand what shadow work was, um, how to utilize it, what its purpose is, and then just how I did that work. So the kind of prompt for this whole video today was I'm scrolling on Instagram and I come across this video. It's talking about men being in their masculine and just having to heal their inner child, and just kind of all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like listening to it, and I like to read the comments in videos. So I go down and I start scrolling the comments, and there's a comment by an individual that says something to the effect of, we always see people talk about shadow work, but they don't tell us how to do it or what to do. And I thought that was a very interesting comment, and it's what made me want to do this whole video. But I feel like I see it all the time, people talking about how to do shadow work and whatnot. But then I really kind of sat and thought about it, and I came to the realization that they give you I don't even know how I want to phrase this. It's almost like you're given the instruction um, what to do, but that how to do it, or like what you're supposed to be doing within that, is kind of left a mystery and up in the air. And once again, I don't think that can be answered like for everybody, because I think it is nuanced individually. But I think I can hopefully try and just talk about my own experiences, the things that have helped me with my shadow work, and maybe that will help give someone a better understanding of how to go about it. So let's just kind of start with, what is shadow work or the shadow self? I just want to reiterate that I am new to this whole journey of things, this whole realm of terminology and explanations, and I have not been doing it for very long. And so if I say something that doesn't resonate with you or that someone believes is wrong or whatnot. One, I'm always open to new education. I love to learn. So please feel free to correct me and I will definitely look into it. But also, just if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate, and that's cool too. That's totally fine. But I would like to just be very candid in my own experiences and have that maybe offer some sort of pre-walked path for someone to venture down and go on their own offshoot. But I digress. Shadow work or shadow self to me are the pieces of ourselves that we bury due to an inability to cope or inability to healthily address them. So, lots of times this is surrounding our traumas. Um, it can be traumas that we ourselves went through, traumas that we witnessed others go through, which is, thereby a trauma to us now. It can be whatever it is that has caused hardship in your life. And if you watched my last video, I was talking about why I thought hardships are a spiritual gift. And what I kind of failed to really talk about was this is shadow work, that how do we make it go from trauma, hardship, pain, suffering into happiness, success, gratitude, this just change of perspective. How do we go from A to B? I said that it was possible. I said that that's why I believe that they're both important, but I didn't really explain how to go from over here to over here. So that's what I want to kind of try and do here, or at least give my own account of how I am traversing that space from hardship to gratitude and happiness and prosperity. So the first thing that you have to do is understand what your shadow self is. What is your shadow work? What are your traumas? That alone is a very challenging thing to do. As a first step, it's easy to see why people are not going to want to take the time to do this, right? Because that's a really big ask. To ask someone to internally reflect on the things that might be just so terrible for them that they don't even remember them, Sometimes people have this kind of amnesia response to trauma as a protection mechanism. And asking someone to go back into those types of memories is really asking someone to do a lot. And I would also just like to interject that I am not a therapist. I have absolutely no therapy training whatsoever. I do believe therapy is important, and if you feel that therapy will help you, that you should seek the guidance of a licensed professional. However, I personally have not had great experiences with therapy myself. I still believe in therapy wholeheartedly. I think that therapy is great when it is conducted correctly. However, I have not been in an experience where it was conducted correctly. And so I just have not had good experiences with therapy, and at this point in my life don't feel like investing that financial investment into something that has not been helping me. So I'm doing this not under the guidance of any kind of therapist, and all on my own thoughts, opinions, knowledge that I have gained, books that I read, ideas I have heard. Just kind of taking this really on my own to deal with my own trauma. And so what that first required me to do was address it. Like, what is my trauma? So I quite literally sat down with a notebook and I wrote down all the things that have just brought me a lot of pain in my life, or have really, these things have kind of changed the course of my life. They've been big benchmark things that have changed how I perceive myself, or maybe how I present myself to others, or just something where it's been very influential to me. And I sat down and I really thought about it, and the interesting insight that exercise alone gave me was, one, I couldn't think of all of them in the first go round. I did spend a whole day thinking about it, and then like I wrote it down, and then over the next few days I had other ones kind of like trickle in, and it wasn't even like they were really small things. What it ended up being was, it were things that were just so a part of my makeup, I would say, that I didn't even register them as trauma. One of these things in particular, I'll just go ahead and give the example. I talked about it in my last video, I believe. Um, I did. Was my brother passing away. And the way he passed away due to hospital neglect, and he spent his whole life in a hospital, and just like overall very like sad story. And I cannot imagine how that felt for my parents going through that. I cannot put myself in that position and even begin to imagine that. But also, that creates a certain type of environment, and that was the environment that I was born into. And I do believe that influenced how my parents probably treated me, and how I viewed things. And knowing I had a brother that I never got to meet was hard for me when I was young. I was a little resentful about it, because I then grew up as an only child. And I never stopped to think that for me, that was a trauma in my life. It was just, it's been all I've ever known. It's been my whole life. I was born into that. I don't even remember having a conversation around it with my parents. But if I sit and think about it, I'm like, yeah, actually, that's a traumatic situation. And then that's being born into kind of the aftermath of a traumatic situation. And it's not like that trauma just poof goes away. So that was the first really big insight I had, was understanding that we have things within ourselves that are likely trauma, that we just don't even recognize as trauma, because it's just such a part of ourself. And I'm smiling because I'm thinking of a conversation I had with someone recently about being addicted to suffering. And I'm not going to go into that, but this idea kind of plays nicely with one another, that if you have this addiction to suffering, this need to suffer, not always, you know, recognizable, I want to point out, can be an unconscious addiction to suffering, or just one that has not yet been recognized. But if we have that, then of course we're going to have these traumas that cause us to suffer. We don't recognize as trauma, because if we recognize it as trauma, then maybe we're going to heal that trauma. And if we heal that trauma, then now we're breaking this addiction cycle to suffering, because now we're healing the suffering. And if we don't have the suffering, then who are we? And now it's a whole existential crisis, right? So, a little offshoot, but I think they're interesting ideas to think about. Anyways, that was my first kind of real insight I got traumas that we don't even recognize as traumas, because they're just such a part of ourselves. And that's a problem, because if you can't recognize it, you can't address it. If you can't address it, you can't fix it. And if you can't fix it, then we're going to have this residual underlying trauma. And I think really that could be why a lot of people who feel like they're doing this work, they feel like they're putting in the time, they're doing all the things that people tell them to do, but they're not getting anywhere. And it's probably because, yeah, they are doing the things. They are doing everything they're supposed to be doing. It's that there's something they're not addressing because they don't realize they need to address it. Now, once again, I'm speaking very generally and collectively here, not in any kind of diagnostic way. I just want to be very clear about that. These are just my thoughts and opinions on the topic, and I'm like getting into it, and so they're just like coming out. After I was able to identify the things that were traumatic for me, and that's going to look different for everyone. Everyone's traumas are different. Everyone has lived different lives. Um, it's really important to remember it's not a competition. It's not. It's not a competition. And once again, this goes back to that idea of being addicted to suffering. Like, well, I can suffer more than you can suffer, or I suffered more and I went through more. And like, it's not a competition. Everybody suffers. And yes, the magnitude of suffering is different from person to person, but also the way people perceive their suffering is also different from person to person. And so there's no way that we on the outside can look at a situation and say that someone is suffering more or less just because arbitrarily, when we look at it, we identify X as more suffering and Y as less suffering. So I also mentioned that in my last video, but just something else I want to point out. I really appreciate when people are allowed to experience things the way that they experience them, and to not have other people dictate their emotions. We shouldn't be telling people how to feel. We shouldn't be telling people that they are feeling too much, or just that's emotional autonomy. We should all have that. So just something I want to make sure I'm pointing out. It's not a competition of who can suffer more. But once you identify these sufferings, now you can start to address them. And I don't quite remember how I went about this. I think what I did do was, I've kind of known for quite some time what the seed or the root of the majority of my suffering has been, or my hardship, which I did also once again say in my last video, just the separation from my daughter. I need to stop saying I am going to work on that. I'm not going to edit it out because I don't feel the need to contrive myself that way. I'm learning and I'm getting better at this, so I'm going to work on the ums. I've been thinking of it the last few videos, but I'm going to verbally put it out into the world that I'm working on that. Anyways, I have already known what the root cause of a lot of my pain and hardship has been. So I decided that I wanted to address that first. And I will say that I feel that once I was in a mental and emotional capacity where I could really give the efforts needed to do that, I was able to do it fairly quickly. And it was a really beautiful experience. I was meditating and I was having just these kind of lucid lines of thinking, and I just had this epiphany, and it made so much sense in the moment. And I actually had drawn back on a meeting with a medium, a psychic medium that I'd had a year prior at a work meeting, a work gathering with the team of girls that I coach with. And this medium had said something to me, and I hadn't thought about it for a long time. And then, I don't know why, but I started thinking about that interaction one day. Might have been after I talked to one of the other coaches who had also brought up that same psychic medium. And I thought about that interaction, and I thought about something that they said to me. And then I have this epiphany, and then I just have this moment of clarity and understanding, and mostly of forgiveness, and this release of guilt that I had just been harboring for years. Even talking about it right now makes me like want to cry. It was just, yeah, see, I have to like fight it. It's a very, it's still a very strong emotional feeling for me that I'm still working through, clearly. But once I was able to really identify what the trauma was, because it wasn't so much just this separation or being separated from my child is causing me trauma. No, that's not it. That's looking at things at a very, very surface level. And that's another problem that people are doing is they're trying to do the shadow work. They want to heal from the shadow work, but they're only looking at it at the surface level because already the surface level is hard and it's painful and it hurts and it's difficult and you don't want to do it because it sucks. But here's the thing is the surface level doesn't fix anything. I looked at it and I said, yes, okay, this is what is causing me pain. But then what you have to do is say, why? Why does this cause me pain? What about this situation is causing me pain? Or what am I feeling pain about? And I had to really sit with that thought and think, okay, I get that this is happening, but like, what is the real core? What is the real root? For me, it's been guilt. It's been this feeling of guilt that I've had. And what I had to do was I had to release the guilt. But when you can't identify what the guilt is about, what you feel guilty about, you can't release it because you can't rationalize those feelings. You just know you feel guilty. You just know you feel bad. So I had to sit there and I had to say, okay, once I figured out that the feeling was guilt, which that alone was its own emotional trek, okay, that is not an easy process just to get to that step. But now once I'm sitting there and I'm recognizing, okay, guilt is what I am feeling. That is the emotion that is causing this, or the feeling that is causing this. Then I have to say, okay, what do I feel guilty about? Why do I feel guilty about it? Like, what is causing that? It's a whole investigation process. That's really what shadow work is. It's this deep investigative process. And it's, like I've said 1,000 times, it's really hard and it's really challenging, but sometimes we just don't recognize that there's still more to get to. We're not getting down to the actual root. There's still more. We think that we've cut it off. You know, we dig, we pull this weed out. Let's say we're pulling weeds. Pull this weed out. We think we're good. And then, you know, a few weeks later, this weed has sprung back up and we're like, what the heck? Like, I dug forever for this weed. My dog is drinking water for like 5 years right now. Now she's done. I was getting really distracted by it. But we pull this weed out and it grows back and we're so confused. We're like, I don't understand. Like, I've used weed killer. I've dug to the root. I keep pulling it out. It keeps coming back. It's because you're still not getting really to that root core. And in my experience, in this specific encounter, this specific experience for me, which I'm really kind of just like laying it all out there for the world to see. So I hope that this resonates with somebody. Because now, of course, I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, wow, I'm like really just letting it out there. But it's okay. Like, obviously, I'm comfortable sharing, so it's fine. That was just a moment of, I just had a little moment. So let's get back on track. Anywho, once I was able to identify this like really core idea of guilt and what this guilt was surrounding and why I was feeling this guilt, what I was able to do was I was able to rationalize these feelings. And for me, I realized I was holding on to this guilt, but this guilt wasn't mine. It was not guilt that I had any kind of authority over. It was not guilt that I had any kind of choice within. I, yes, had choices up to a certain point, but at a certain point, things were completely out of my hand. And it was within that point of things that changes happened that were outside my control. And I held a lot of guilt from what happened through those changes. And so being able to recognize that It was not something I had control over. And that's that. Like, it is what it is. Control the things that you can control, and you have to let go of the things that you can't control. And so in that moment, I made this decision that I recognized I couldn't control these certain things that happened, that I was holding this guilt from. And so I decided to let go of it, because why am I going to keep holding on to something that I can now consciously recognize it's not mine to hold on to? It's not my fault. It's not my guilt. It's not my pain. It's not my suffering. And at that point, if I'm able to recognize that these things are not mine and I choose to hold on to them, then I don't really want to get better, because I'm choosing to hold on to them. Now, this gets into this whole idea of, it's as easy as making a decision of letting it go, but it's also as hard as just having to make a decision to let it go. As someone who has spent so much of my life being like, I feel how I feel and I can't change that. My whole life I've said that. I've like told so many people that, and this thought is just now like coming out and coming into manifestation verbally for me as well. So this is kind of like a cool moment, because this is very insightful for me. But I've always told people that, and that I was not in control of my emotions. And now, through this process of shadow work, of mastering myself and my emotions, I realized that I am in charge of my emotions, okay? I do get to decide how I feel. Now, that doesn't mean I don't feel everything. I still feel all the same feelings. I still feel sad. I still feel depressed. I still feel anxious, okay? What it means is I can feel these things, and then I can decide that those are not going to run my life, okay? I'm not giving those control. A really good example of this, another shadow work that I'm working on, and I believe that this situation happened in order to re-bring it to my attention that this is something that I really need to address and start working through now that I'm kind of doing better in some other areas. But I had an experience where a young man knocked on my car window. No more ums. I have a lot of bad experiences with men in public doing things to me or towards me that have made me very uncomfortable in the past 5 or 6 years. This has led to a lot of anxiety. It has led to myself being very reclusive, very untrusting of people, and I will frequently get panic attacks in public due to these experiences. But since leaving Texas has been better, but this kid knocked on my door. It just kind of, I had a triggered response to these previous things I've experienced, and after having just a short, brief conversation with them, I left. It was fine. I'm pretty sure they were harmless, but I immediately was panicking, and I was having a panic attack, an anxiety attack, whatever the correct term is in the moment. But I was freaking out, and I decided to choose how I felt, because yes, I was feeling scared, and yes, I was feeling anxious, and yes, I was feeling all these symptoms of a panic attack, but I was fine. Nothing happened. I was in my car driving home. I was perfectly safe. And I had to sit there and remind myself that, and tell my emotions that I acknowledged that they were scared and that they were having this conditioned response, which is not my fault, but that I was safe and it was okay. And that's what I mean by getting to decide how you feel. Now, that doesn't mean you just instantaneously feel better, but it does mean that you're making a conscious effort to rewire your programming, rewire how you respond to things. Not that that is a bad response. I want to make that abundantly clear. I think that everyone should always be very cognizant of their surroundings and what is going on. But I do also believe that listen to your gut instincts, and if you have a bad feeling about something, listen to that. Whether you are a man, a woman, whether you identify as a man or a woman, non binary, whomever you are, I don't care. Everyone. Always trust your gut and your instincts, because there are people who will take advantage of you not doing that. So that's another just aside, something I just feel very strongly about that I want to include as I'm candidly speaking on this topic. But anyways, I'm getting off topic as I typically do. If you watch any of my videos, you know that I do this. So if you're still here, thank you. I appreciate it. We will get back into the main portion of this. Once I was able to just realize what I needed to do in order to overcome this major issue in my life, and that was really just simply me letting go of it, that is really the how or the what you have to do. And beyond saying that, there's really no other way I can describe it. I think it looks differently for everyone. How everyone comes to terms with that is their own personal journey. But it's really, and I don't feel like I'm really giving any new insight, to be quite honest here. Most of this is just being able to explain my own recent experiences and hoping that that is helpful. But it really is just this decision of, for me, it was, I feel guilty about X, but I can recognize that X is not my fault, and therefore I am no longer going to hold on to those feelings of guilt of X. And I think I'm a pretty introspective person in general, for the vast majority of my life. So I think I already kind of had a head start on a lot of this just because I was already doing a lot of introspection, whether I kind of realized it or not. So I don't think that it's always going to be that fast for someone to have, but it could be. The ums. It could be, I did it, I feel pretty quickly, even though I did have kind of maybe this background setup that I just wasn't aware of, who knows. But anyways, I feel like that kind of is a good encompassing of what shadow work is, the goal is, like what you're trying to do, and kind of the outcome you're trying to get to. So the main point that the whole spark of this video was about was this individual acknowledging that this gets said repeatedly, but how do we do it? So these are my top 3 examples, suggestions, ways that have worked for me. I don't think any of these 3 are innovative. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not innovative. I'm going to just say them again because I think they need to be said and because they work for me. I think there's also a lot of other things that people can do that I haven't done or have not yet explored or have not yet thought about, or just don't want to add to this video that's already super freaking long because I ramble. So I'm going to just talk about the 3 things that I have done, that I currently do, that have made the most impact for me. So number 3 is the tarot. Tarot and oracle cards have definitely been my introduction to not only my spiritual journey, but also a more intentional self-reflective journey. I first got interested in tarot cards 5-6 years ago, and it was this very interesting thing where I just felt this very natural pull towards them, and I could not really ever tell you why. But I used them off and on for the past 5 years, kind of in 2 main spurts, I would say. And I use them as a self-reflective tool. And that is the great thing about tarot, is it really is a great tool for self-reflection. It is often referred to as like a mirror to the soul. And it just helps provide answers that are obviously already within you, because they have to come from somewhere. But you just need maybe a little poking and prodding in a certain direction. And the tarot is really great for doing that. I recommend it so highly for people who want to strengthen their connection with themselves, who want to really do some work on their soul, on their shadow work, just get to know themselves better and like develop this relationship that I think a lot of people are missing. I think the most important relationship you can have is your relationship with yourself, and it's one that gets neglected so often. Like, we put every other relationship before we put the relationship with ourselves, and that's a huge problem. It's like a big problem. It's probably why we have so many people who need to do all this shadow work. But the tarot is really great for doing that. I really highly recommend it. I love the oracle too, but I do personally just feel a much more stronger pull and message from tarot because of the fact that it is the same in all the decks. Like, it's the same cards in every deck. It's the same suits, or the suits are representative of the same thing in every single deck. And so it's just this universal archetypal message, whereas oracle cards are much more, based on the person who designed the deck and what messages that they wanted to put in there. So, number 3, tarot. Number 3 brings me to number 2, and number 2 is journaling. I love journaling, and let me tell you, I have been told to journal for years. I have collected notebooks on notebooks. Your girl loves some school supplies. I love pens and notebooks, but click diddle these notebooks. I never journaled. I would maybe write a couple pages, and I kept saying I couldn't find the time, but the reality was it wasn't a priority for me, and so I didn't make the time. I was making time for other things in my life that were more of a priority to me at that point, which is fine. I have since come back around to those things not being a huge priority, the tarot being a priority, the journaling being a priority. And the way I journal is I do the two together. Well, at least that's how it kind of started, was I would do a tarot spread. I would record the tarot spread in the journal. I would record the meanings of the cards in the journal. This is helping me learn the cards as well. And then I would write out my interpretation of the spread. And I journaled like this exclusively for probably, I don't know, a month and a half. But I made it through almost an entire notebook doing this. It was a lot of writing, and it was really cool because, one, it helped me get better at tarot. I learned the card meanings better. Writing things out is very helpful for me. I now had a really cool tarot journal to reflect on, and that ended up being incredibly important to me. I was able to see what cards were showing up where, in what positions, on what dates, what was happening in my life at that time. It just took this tool of introspection I was already using, the tarot, right? And then it just elevated it to this like crazy cool level of, now I was connecting all these dots. And when you're someone who's looking for things like signs and synchronicities, and you quite literally have just an entire notebook of them in front of you, that's cool. That's energizing. That is I can't even think of the word I want to like say right now. It's like motivating, right? You're like, okay, I'm doing the work. Now I can see where the work is paying off because I see where these little dots connect. And it's cool and it's exciting. And it's just reaffirming that you're on the right path and you're doing the right things. And then that leads me to my number one tool for shadow work, for introspection. I'm sure you've already guessed it. Meditation. Meditation. I admittedly have not done a single tarot read in like probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I'm not sure why I don't feel as called to do some tarot. I kind of do today, so I think I might do a video after this one. But I just haven't really felt super called to do it. But meditation, I've spent a lot of time meditating in the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And it has been life-changing. Just, I want to cry just thinking about it. It's been so incredible. I have really started working through these traumas, and I've been able to really kind of like alchemize these traumas, where now this is kind of that other side of like what the after effect you're trying to get to is. All these things that caused me like pain and hurt and just hardship, now I'm able to view them in this way where I see them as this gift. This relates back to my last video. And I can be grateful and happy for them. And so I've done this transcendence of this hardship, this alchemizing of this hardship, of this pain, of this shadow self. And now I feel like these shadow parts, these like true emotional, turbulent hardships are the absolute most beautiful parts about me. And that, oh my gosh, it's just like, it's so emotional. It's like it's like diamonds. People talk about diamonds, and it's really just the compression and years and years and years of compression, and all of a sudden it becomes this like really beautiful diamond. And that's really kind of what this whole process is. And for me, meditation has been the single most helpful, impactful thing that I've done. And I tell that to people. I try and urge everyone to meditate. Once again, something that has been suggested to me over and over and over and over. And I just didn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I had this resistance to it. And I don't know why, because I wanted to feel better, but I wasn't doing the things that people were telling me to do. And I did have some sort of inherent resistance. I had some sort of addiction to suffering that I wasn't ready to let go of until I decided I was ready to let go of it. But I want to take a moment to talk about some things about meditation really quickly. I'm not any sort of meditation specialist. Once again, these are just things that I have done that I feel could be helpful, and just things that make sense to me. And so I try and share them as much as possible. So whenever I tell anyone to meditate, or I ask if they've tried meditation, I'm frequently met with, I would love to meditate, but I can't quiet my brain down. I'm too anxious. I can't sit still long enough, yada, yada, yada. So I'm an extremely anxious person. I've been extremely anxious my whole entire life. So I get it. I've had sleep issues my whole life because I can't turn this off. I get it. Let me tell you how I get around it. One, I do not do any silent meditation. Nope, can't do it. If I hear any kind of noise, if I'm not in like a completely silent room, if there's anything that can draw my attention, it's going to draw my attention. And I know that that's kind of the point of meditation, and that type of meditation has its place, but for me, it's not helpful. So I play meditative music. I try to play music that does not have lyrics. I do not want to hear someone's voice. I do not want a guided meditation, because I get caught up on their voice and I focus on that, and I don't want to be focusing necessarily on their voice, because then I'm not focusing on my internal cues that I need to be feeling, and it's not as productive. So, meditative music. I prefer to wear headphones so that it is a full immersive experience. However, having it play near my ears works too. I personally like to be laying down. I think that's the most comfortable way to meditate for me. Find what works for you. The trickiness with laying down is people can fall asleep. I like that. I like being in that kind of lucid space of meditation and sleep, the in between. So I do it for that purpose, but if you're someone that does fall asleep really easily, maybe sit up. I like to do it in my room because it is a comfortable location for me. I open my window for a couple of reasons. One, I want the smell of outside to come into my room. I want to have that olfactory sensation that I can ground to. These are all grounding techniques that I kind of use when I meditate. So I open my window. Also, because it is still cooler outside, the breeze is cool. So now I have a tactile sensation I can once again ground to. I will also sometimes hold a crystal in my hand. You can do this for a variety of reasons, whether you feel a certain energy with a crystal, which I do also practice the energies of crystals and all that kind of good stuff. But also, the more important reason that I do it is it's another grounding technique. So if I'm laying there, I can feel the texture of the stone, or I can feel the temperature. Is this stone cool? Is it getting kind of warm because I've been holding it in my hand? Is it smooth? Is it rough? Is there a pointed edge? Are there spikes? There's a lot of sensations there. So how I use this, I'll also light some incense is another kind of olfactory cue. I close my eyes. I do not like to have any sort of ability to see anything. If you have an eye mask, that would also probably be beneficial or helpful. And what I'm doing here is when I can sense my mind wandering, I ground back to one of these cues. So if I'm laying there and I'm having this internal dialogue, right, which is something we often do, and maybe we don't recognize that we're having this internal dialogue, and then we get to a point where either we give up on meditation because it's not working, or B, we recognize we're having an internal dialogue and that's why we're not getting to the state we need to get into. So once you recognize that, and that alone is a practice, that's like a great first step in meditation, is just being able to recognize when you're having this internal dialogue and when it's distracting from the point of the meditation. But once you reach that point, then you can ground to one of these things. So I will, I'll be thinking and then I'm like, ah, crap, I'm like having thoughts. I need to stop that. So I will feel a rock or stone or whatever I have. Sometimes my dog lays on me, and so I will really ground into the feeling of her weight on me. You could also use a weighted blanket. I'll focus back into whatever I'm listening to. And from there, I really just focus on my breathing. I do very deep inhale, a very slow exhale, hold my breath in between, very calm, very relaxed, and just imagining my mind opening. And then I just try and stay in that state. But the point of this kind of explanation is just these grounding techniques that I use. So opening a window for the air and the coolness, holding a stone, lighting incense, playing something auditory that is going to not distract you but help you stay centered and focused. And there are a lot of ways to practice meditation. You don't have to be great at it at first. Don't expect to be great at it at first, but you might be lucky and you might nail it. It's really just practice, practice, practice. So once again, thank you for being here for an extremely long-winded video. Who knows if anyone's going to get to the end of it. If you do, I hope that this just resonated with you. I hope you got some new techniques. And if you try any of the things that I've suggested, I would really love to hear how they work out for you. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and also happy spring. Feels good.